Hello, and thank you for joining us for our last webinar in our series from New Jersey City University for the Department of Educational Technology. I'm Samantha Bonnet, and I'm here with Katie Nieves, and she's going to be presenting her workshop today on best practices and resources for digital learning environments. And so I'm going to turn it over to Katie to formally introduce herself and then get started on our webinar for today.
Everybody. So I'm Katie. I am a special education teacher. I teach up in Sussex County, New Jersey. I teach language arts at the resource level. For 6th grade, I teach reading intervention or in Gillingham, and I've done inclusion, 6, 7, 8, physics, chem, history, language arts, everything, a little bit of everywhere. And my goal for today is kind of to just share some of the things that I found that have been helpful for my different types of learners in my classroom. And I hope that you can take something away from maybe my experiences. So I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Can you guys all see it? Yes, okay, awesome. If I go into present mode, can you guys still see everything okay? All good? Okay.
Yep,
awesome.
You're good.
Thank you. All right, so, this out of the way. All right, so this is the presentation. I put the link at the top in case anybody wants access to it. It's just tinyurl.com/Nieves and then NJCU. That's the link to the entire presentation in case you want the resources in it. You want to go back and reference it at any point in time. I'm pretty good about linking the resources, so everything in this presentation is clickable and it links to the resource directly, so you can use it as a reference for yourself if you want to. So just to go over what my goals are today, I want to be able to review some just quick and basic accessibility requirements for designing digital content, and so more specifically how to make sure that what you're creating is accessible for all learners. It kind of falls under the ADA a little bit there, making sure that everything online is accessible. I want to go over the UDL Framework, the Universal Design for Learning, and how to use that to kind of plan your instruction going forward. I'm going to go over a lot of tools that my students like to use, that I like to use, and then just some basic strategies for how to support students of all different learning needs within an online space, especially since we are now officially going into online learning for the rest of the year. I figure that these might kind of be some resources you could go back to kind of think about your students and figure out how to support them. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do, and bear with me, I'm trying something different. I love to do this with my students. I have a URL on the screen. It's tinyurl.com/KNJamboard. It's not going to work on your phone, but it'll work on your device. If you go there, it'll open up like a collaborative whiteboard space. And I want us to think about and kind of brainstorm together what has been your biggest struggle in supporting your students so far online. If you go into that link, you will have editing rights, and there's actually a bar on the side. Just add some sticky notes, add some text with some of your ideas. You can drag and move them all around the screen. I figured we could take a minute to do that just to kind of figure out maybe what some of our joint concerns were with supporting our students. I'm seeing all the anonymous animals pop up in the corner, so I'm assuming it's working and people can get into it. So as you're starting to do that, let's kind of say this is something that we are, just to like preface it, I guess. In my district, we are required to do live instruction at least once a week for each class. It is 20 minutes in length. And I found that this is kind of a fun tool that my students really like to use when we're collaborating back and forth. There's like the sidebar with the option to draw and add sticky notes, and you can type on top of the sticky notes and it kind of inserts it into the board for you. So it's a nice way for my students to kind of collaboratively brainstorm instead of me talking to them for 20 minutes. So it's just kind of something different. I figured I would try it.
Katie, would you mind sharing us that screen so people that are viewing the webinar in the recording would be able to see what that Jamboard looks like as we're working in real time?
Yeah, sure. So it's on my, yeah, I can, do we need the link anymore? I can go into it the other way then, where everybody can see it. Let me go. To see everybody's in. Oops. Perfect. Because I'm starting to see some of the sticky notes pop up. And this is just something, again, it's a nice way to kind of get students thinking and sharing together within a collaborative space. You can also add pictures to it. My students are big on adding visuals to our Jamboards. They think it's fun. And it's really quick and accessible from the internet. The only problem is finding it through apps. You have to download the actual app to do it on your phone, but through a device, a Chromebook, a laptop, it's pretty easily to use. So I'm just looking at what everybody's kind of filling in right now. Getting in touch with students is a problem. We're having that issue too as well right now. Even with my district is one-to-one with Chromebooks. And we did try to go through and we bought little hubs for everybody who didn't have internet access at home, but even so, it's still hard to get in touch with them. That's something I'm struggling with too. Motivation. Especially now, we've been in it so long that I feel like my students are also struggling with the motivation as well. Multiple distractions, a lot of distracting factors. I agree. The K1 area, I can't imagine the K1 area. I feel bad. I feel for you guys because I know that's got to be really tough to get them on. We're kind of just trying to do a paper-based and everything. So I'll let you guys kind of continue to filter that in if you want to add anything else. But I'm kind of seeing the same thing in my classrooms. It's really hard to support all learners in an online space. Students are working synchronously, asynchronously, and it's kind of difficult to keep up with everything. The technology not being reliable sometimes. Students just in general struggling with different things. So I'm going to hop back to the presentation. I'm going to share it. I'll leave this open in case you want to continue with it, but just something fun I figured I'd throw in there. So the first part of the presentation I'm going to talk about is actually what the UDL framework looks like. It's what I use to try to plan going forward, to try to make sure that I'm incorporating the needs of all of my learners as I'm going through. Initially, it was very difficult to try to plan what we were going to do, how everything was going to be executed. But moving forward, I've tried to follow back with this framework to make sure I'm trying to support all my students in my classroom. So just to kind of clarify really quick, and I'm not going to go through every bullet point, I just kind of wanted to kind of give a generic overview. The UDL framework allows you to offer multiple methods of representation, engagement, and action and expression. The representation goes along with how and what they're accessing, how are they gaining the information, giving them different opportunities to kind of gain the information that you're presenting to them, supporting their background knowledge. Engagement is allowing for choice, limiting distractions, which we talked about on our board, collaboration and feedback, self-reflection. And then action and expression goes with how can we actually provide students with different examples of ways to show what they've learned instead of kind of one singular way. So the UDL really tries to prevent barriers from existing within your classroom and trying to make sure that all the content is accessible to everyone. And kind of everything I did today and everything I'm going to show you, whether it's a strategy or a technology tool, I tried to kind of go back to this framework to make sure that it kind of fits, that all my learners were kind of embraced in the classroom. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to go over is actually more of the logistics of the content itself. And it's just some things that I want people to keep in mind as they're creating content. Some of these things you might already know, but just to kind of keep in mind going forward to make sure that all of your content that you're digitally creating is accessible for everyone. One of the biggest and the weirdest things is font. But reading on the computer is way different than reading on paper. So I like to call some of I think about the Pinteresty fonts that are kind of curvy and cute and they look nice on a bulletin board, but they're not so feasible in an online space. So one of the most important things to consider when you're creating content for students online is to make sure that you're sticking with kind of the generic fonts. Like Tahoma and Georgia, they were built to actually be used on the computer and be read on the computer, and text-to-speech readers actually are able to pick these up a little bit easier. So it makes it a little bit easier for students to read it if they're using that kind of tool. All of my students use text-to-speech to read any kind of content on the computer, so I like to make sure my font is accessible and compatible with that. One of the things I found that was interesting was that you shouldn't use more than 2 fonts within a single document or assignment. It just makes it very cumbersome to look at. Talking and capitalization is obviously not ideal. And one of the interesting things too was that you should avoid colored fonts when only using it when necessary, and to kind of use a white background and a black font to try to bring that out a little bit more for the students. I'm doing a lot of hyperlinking now for my students. We like to use HyperDocs a lot to explore different resources and things like that. And one of the interesting components of the HyperDocs and linking in general is that you have to give all your links a purposeful name. That's kind of something that's falling in compliance with the ADA when creating things online, making sure that your link that you're creating is something that can stand alone. If students are using text-to-speech or a screen reader to read any content, if you just paste the link, kind of like I know I did it at the beginning of the slide, just kind of tell you where to go. But if you're doing that consistently for students who need to access a document, it reads each letter individually since it's not a full word. So it kind of makes it more frustrating for the student. So instead, kind of consider adding just a regular link that has the description of what it is. And I gave an example on the sidebar there. So you don't want to say like, oh, click here, because that really doesn't give them any indication of what it is. Again, the link itself, each letter will be read individually. It's not a easygoing process then. And then giving a description like webinar presentation is an easier way to do that for students. This is just something generic I try to remind people to do, and I try to be mindful of it myself when I'm creating things online. I mean, you know, generally if your students are using a screen reader to access digital content, but it's just good practice to keep in mind anyway, because you never know who might be viewing your content and who might need that. Having an alternate text for each image that you include. So generally when you're creating a presentation, a document, a website, you have the option to format your photos. Most of the time in that space, there is a setting to add alternate text as well. And that allows the students who are using a screen reader to actually read the image. So it's, instead of saying this is a picture of a blank, you would just describe what the image is of. That way, when the screen reader comes to it within the text, they're able to read what the image is out loud for them. That gets a little bit more tricky when you're doing graphs and things like that. So that's something to keep in mind when you're presenting content to students who might be using that type of device. They recommend keeping it short, but also descriptive at the same time. And again, not all of your students may be using that type of tool, but it's just kind of a good practice to get into. It's something I hadn't previously done, but now I've kind of gotten in the habit of doing that every time I add an image. And you can't see it unless you have a screen reader. So it's not like it's actually present on the screen. It's embedded actually within the image itself. So I think one of the biggest things, especially if we're doing video content for our students, is to make sure we have access to closed captioning, making sure that's turned on, making sure it's activated. If you're doing any kind of recorded lesson, we use Google Meet in my district. I know a lot of people are going to Google Meet. We were not allowed to use Zoom, unfortunately. But Google Meet does have the closed captioning option that I leave on for my students. I also create YouTube videos or share YouTube videos. And what's really interesting about YouTube, I think most of us know that it has the closed captioning already built into the videos. But on top of that, it has built-in transcripts automatically for every video that's created on YouTube. So there's a settings here within YouTube, and if you click on it, it says open transcript, and I have an image of what that looks like here from a TED Talk. It actually has the entire transcript of that video broken down, so that students can not only use the closed captioning within the video themselves, but they also have a follow-up transcript for when they're finished. And it's linked to specific time frames, so students can go through it, click on a specific phrase, and the YouTube video will go back to that moment within the video. That way they can kind of refer back to it. Obviously, the better quality of video, the better the transcript will be. Homemade videos, depending on the sound, if it's not perfect, there might be little catches here and there that aren't what you intended. But if you're making the actual video, you can go back and edit those things. So I try to be mindful when I'm making videos and posting them on YouTube that I know this transcript option is going to be used. I need to try to speak as clearly as I can and then go back and edit if I need to make it easier for my students. And you can also, which one of my students love to do, you can also change the closed captioning. It doesn't have to be black on white text on black font, on black background, I apologize. You can change the opacity and things like that. You can make the closed captioning bigger, you can make it smaller, so they can kind of play around with those options within YouTube itself. And it does save to their account, so if they watch any video, they are able to successfully carry that setting over. If you are creating a video or doing a live lesson for your students and you don't have access to closed captioning, if maybe the platform you're using doesn't have it, This is kind of a nice option you can use to ensure that you're making a transcript for your students who might need it. It's called Web Captioner. It is a free website online. So what I'll do sometimes is I'll open it up in the background. Like I could have it going right now. It's just a generic website, and once you click Start Captioning, you're able to successfully start talking, and it'll pick up the words you're saying. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to close out and open it up again, otherwise I'd show you kind of what it looks like. But it kind of connects to your microphone, so that way as you're talking, it picks up on the words. And when you're finished, you just select stop, and you have the option to immediately export that file as either, I think it's a Word doc or a text-based file. You can edit it, and then you can post it for your students. So for a while, we were struggling with the closed captioning on our Google Meets. I was able to put this up in the background. It would track everything I was saying. I could go back and quickly fix any errors that were occurring within the text, and I could post that for my students so they have the video and they have the transcript at the same time. I figured this was just something I'd throw in. I know a lot of us use Google Slides. It doesn't work with PowerPoint, unfortunately, unless they made that, they have released that feature. I don't know if they have yet or not, but it's called Graphical Slides. It's an add-on, and what it allows for you to do is it checks your actual accessibility of your presentation before you share it to your students. It lets you know that there are errors within the ADA compliance that are occurring. It tells you how severe they might be and what needs to be fixed quickly. It links it to the actual slides, so you know exactly where the error is. So like I have my example over here. I don't have alt text for some of my images. It would tell me which images don't have that, so I need to go back and add it again. It's just a kind of a quick way to make sure that what you're creating is accessible for everybody. This is just advice that I kind of recommended. We are one-to-one with Chromebooks in my district, but I know that not everybody has that kind of ability. So what you could do for your students is try to reach out to families in the best way, in the way that's best for you, to see what types of devices your students are using at home, if they have any at all. I know even though my students have Chromebooks, some of them have other devices they prefer to use, especially there's the iPad versus Chromebook debate all the time. So what I tried to do at the beginning was I sent home to my parents a list of accessibility features, and I did link them here to this presentation. So if you click on them, if you're in the presentation itself, it will go to the accessibility page. It tells you everything that that device can do that is already built in to support the student. And most of the time that's things like contrast backgrounds and changing font and increasing magnification and making sure that you have text to speech or speech to text. Those are generally the things that are available within the platform. But I've tried to send that home to parents to make it known to them that they have these support systems available to them. In my case, I sent home the Google one, and I told them everything that was available on the Chromebook. That way they felt like they could use the Chromebook to support their student a little bit more. My students have a lot of needs in the classroom, especially with the reading out loud and things like that. They need to have things read to them. And obviously I'm not there to read it to them, and their parents might be not home, they might be working, things like that. So it was good for them to know that there are features built into these devices that can kind of support their students. Okay, so this is the second part of the presentation. So I figured I'd go over some of the strategies that I found that have been successful when supporting and creating content that is accessible and supportive for students within the classroom, and making sure that everything is supportive for all learners. So the video creation is probably the biggest thing. I went over this with a lot of different teachers in my district. Keep it short. I mean, we've gone through a lot of difficulties of teachers trying to record a 50-minute lecture, and that's not really going to work for a lot of students. So I try to keep with the mindset of there's a philosophy of like 1 minute per grade level. My videos for my 6th graders are no more than like 3 minutes. And if they have to be more than 3 minutes, I make multiple videos that are like 3 minutes in length, just to kind of chunk the learning a little bit. I don't know, even me personally, if I see a video that's longer than 10 minutes, I don't really want to watch it, even if it's something I'm interested in. So that kind of keeps it short and engaging, quick. They can go on to the next video. If they need to refer back to a video, they don't have to rewatch it all over again. It's just a quick little piece of what they need, and things like that. Obviously, if you're making a video with some kind of interaction element where the students have to pause and reflect and do something along with you, Like I make videos going through spelling words and read words for my intervention class. Those are a little bit longer because the students are expected to be doing it alongside you. But when I try to do direct instruction and directions videos, I try to keep it as short as possible. I used to use Screencastify a lot. I've been having a lot of glitching issues with Google Drive and not uploading quickly. That might be a district-wide issue within my Google Drive. But I use Loom instead. It kind of works the same as Screencastify to create my videos. It's really nice because just like other screencasting tools, you can have your face in the corner and the whole screen in front of you, so you can model and walk through things while they also see your face. I do find that they like to see your face. I'm not really sure why, but when I make videos without my face, they seem to be less watched than when I'm actually in the corner talking to them. Plus, Loom is really nice, and they send you nice positive messages before you turn your camera on, like, hey, your hair looks good today. And I'm like, oh, thanks, Loom, that's great. But it's really kind of it's a nice system. It's really quick, there's no processing. That's why I go to it, because you don't have to wait for it to sync to your Google Drive. You don't have to upload it to YouTube. As soon as you hit end recording, it immediately copies a URL for you that you can post onto your learning management system, and you're done. So it's quick and easy, and your students can interact with it. They can put comments in it and things like that. You can see who watched it, which is really fun too. So that's good to see, like, which students are watching the video, which aren't. Not that I'm holding them accountable for that, but if a student has a question and they haven't watched the video, I can refer them to it before I go through the process all over again, and it kind of saves a little bit of time. This is more of a generic strategy, but I found that, and this is a screenshot from my May 4th directions for my students. I found that for supporting students in the best way possible, I need to be extremely explicit in my directions, and I need to provide multiple ways for them to access the directions. So I do a combination of step-by-step text. I walk through the step-by-step process in a video that's usually a minute. And I also give an audio recording of me just reading the directions out loud. So I have 3 different links to my assignments every day, and I literally go through step 1, step 2, step 3. And sometimes they're very basic steps, like you need to be on Google Classroom, which they already know because they're on Google Classroom, they see the directions. But I found that I need to be that kind of step-by-step process. The first couple of weeks, even with some steps, were difficult for my students, and I found that really breaking it down into like really small chunks was easier for them. Like, as you can see on my direction sheet, it tells them what tab they're going into and what the name of the assignment is, and usually I link the assignment to it, and if it's a recurring assignment, I link the old assignment for them. But just really being explicit in the directions, and so there's no room for interpretation. They know exactly where to click. And I found that for my students who need a lot of support from parents, this has been a really good strategy because the parents know exactly what to do, and they feel like they have the resource through the video or through my step-by-step text to kind of support them in telling their child what they need to do. So speaking of families, I'm a very tech-based classroom. I'm an advocate of students with disabilities using as much technology as they can to kind of empower them and give them the support that they need. So my students use a lot of tech. That being said, it's easy for the families. Sometimes they don't know what tools we're using. Even if a student's comfortable with it, the parent most likely doesn't know what it is unless they're in the classroom themselves. So this is a tool that I really love for my parents. It's not a screencaster. It's like a screenshot creator. It's called iRad, and it's a website. It works on any browser. But instead of me having to create a video and saying like, okay, first, like, let me show you parents how your child is going to do this, 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 and this, and walking through it, you don't say anything. You just start recording, and you just click through the process as if you were a student. And what it does is it builds the tutorial for the parents and creates a step-by-step interactive guide with text-to-speech, with you can see it here with little icons for where they have to click and what they have to do. But you don't have to do anything other than click on the assignments and things like that. So I've created tutorials this way for telling parents how to get to Google Classroom and how to find the assignments. And even if their child knows how to use a tool we're using like Edpuzzle or Flipgrid, I walk through really quickly how to do that. And it's just quicker than having to create a screencast where I'm narrating it myself. It's all done for you within that database. And I think there's a premium version, but I've been using it for years and I've never needed the premium version, so I'm assuming it's okay not to have it. I guess my steps aren't long enough. I'm assuming if you get beyond probably 20 steps, maybe that's too much. But I found that it's pretty successful for my parents. I send them the link, they're able to click through and work through technology issues they might be having.
Katie, quick question for you.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity to translate that to a different language, such as Spanish, for families that are not English speaking that has a child with exceptionalities?
I haven't checked in the settings, but I want to say that there might be. I don't want to definitely say no. I haven't looked recently, but you can edit the text yourself too. That comes up. So you could probably translate it that way if there's not, but I'm not sure if there's one built in or right. It would make it a little bit easier.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Definitely, I'll take a look at that.
No problem. This is just a basic strategy that I've kind of found for my students that I really like to make sure I'm incorporating all their needs. We do a weekly survey at the end of the week to see how they're doing. Some of my students are very open about sharing how everything's going, probably a little too open, but we have like weekly meetings and things like that where they're sharing how their families are doing, who's still working, who's, you know, maybe losing a job, and they're very open about it. But this is kind of for all my students. I have them fill out a survey to see how they feel like they're doing personally and academically. I kind of do both. How do you feel on a scale of 1 to 5? How do you feel about this? And I always end with, is there anything I need to know? And they can say no. Or, you know, they can share something if they want to share something with me. And then what can I do to better support you is my big one. Because if you're thinking about the needs of everyone in the classroom, I know we know our students really well, but there's some little things here and there that might help them that we may not realize. Like, I didn't realize that my one student was like, well, can you please start moving this assignment up to the top of the stream every Thursday so I don't have to scroll down to the bottom or like Control F through the screen? And I'm like, oh yeah, that's easy enough to do. So I always like the what can I do to better support you question, because that's when the student can kind of step back and say, yeah, this isn't working for me. I need you to try something else to make it a little bit easier. And generally now it seems to be more tech things like, can you move this? Can you underline this? Can you do this for me? But it's good to kind of have an awareness on their part too of what they need, and then on our part of how we can kind of better help them without having to try to figure it out for ourselves all the time. Because like I said, I do know my students pretty well, and I know what their, you know, modifications are, their accommodations are, but there's always little things here and there that maybe they find they need that I didn't really think about originally. This is just a way to organize. I figured I'd throw this in there. I split my classes up and I keep it consistent. It's kind of the most important thing. When I first started doing the online learning, it was very different than how I organized my Google Classroom normally. We organize assignments by numbers. So that I don't have to yell out the names of assignments in class. I'm just like 6.2, and they're like, okay, I know where to go. But I couldn't do that with online learning, so I had to kind of figure out a new system. And I found that keeping it consistent for students seems to be the best thing to do. Post your directions in the same place every day or weekly, depending on how your classroom runs. Post assignments in the same places so they know exactly where to go, so there's no hunting and like trying to figure out where everything is. I work on a really good special ed team where we all keep things in the same place and we organize things the same way too, so it eliminates kind of the guessing factor between teachers. That's been helpful. I put in the corner of this slide a Monday through Friday breakdown for my intervention class, where I'm kind of explicitly going through directions, telling them exactly what documents to open and what to do, and they know to do that every single week. So there's no guessing. They know that, okay, Monday's coming, I'm gonna post all of your work for the week. Here you go. This is everything, and everything's linked in there for you. And I know that seems kind of obvious, but that was something that I found that was really helpful for my students, just making sure that everything's in the same place and addressed the same way every week to kind of keep things consistent. Same thing with scheduling. That's my students tend to have difficulty with scheduling. Especially because there's no rhyme or reason for when our office hours are in my district and when our class periods are. So it's really difficult for my students to adjust to normal changes in the schedule. Having to figure out every week when everybody's different meeting times are became kind of problematic. They would miss meetings. And not that we're taking attendance, but they were upset because they weren't involved and they forgot when things were. So we kind of created running documents for all of our students where they could plug in when our meetings are. And kind of like the assignment posting, we make sure to keep things consistent. We're posting things in the same place all the time. We have the same office hours every week. We have the same live meeting times every week. And I put a screenshot of my lovely Star Wars Google Classroom banner. And it shows, I created this for my students so that when on Google Classroom, they can automatically look at it every day and see, oh, this is when language arts office hours are. This is when live lessons are. So that it's right there in their face when they log on and they can see it right away without having to hunt through my website, trying to hunt through my Google Classroom. It's like right there for them. Okay. So really quick, I wanted to go over some tools. I probably won't get to all the tools, but that's why I kind of gave you the presentation, because I figured you can kind of look through them too and see what you need. I wanted to offer some ideas for supporting students that have been successful for my students in terms of live lessons. And I know not everybody's doing live lessons and we're only doing 20 minutes a week. But these have been kind of things my students have appreciated, that's been supportive of them. We've done a lot of read alouds, obviously, and modeling strategies. But one of the things I really liked for my students was giving them opportunities just for regular check-ins. No lesson, no learning, just how are you doing? How's it going? We kind of build our social skills work into there. I was doing a lot with my students before we left with, working on taking turns in conversations and how to address each other and how to address feedback and things like that are lost in the online learning a little bit. So these live lessons kind of became those opportunities for students to still share and talk, but practice those social skills. And then we also use live lessons for opportunities just to build community, because that's something that's really important to my students, I found, and that is kind of lost. We're so focused on like, okay, let's just do the assignments and we're done, but they're missing out on those opportunities to build relationships and build community. So we've been trying to incorporate things like games. My students really love, there's a game called Quick Draw. It's through Google. And what'll happen is a student will share their screen and the computer will tell them something they have to draw, and then the computer guesses what it is. So it's kind of fun for them to play together. It's almost like a Pictionary, but with AI instead of with the other students, but they get to see it. So just giving opportunities for things like that, aside from the regular lessons, aside from standard work, just giving them opportunities to talk and share and just be together. I think it's been really important for my kids and supporting students in general. This is whiteboard.fi. My math teachers love this because they can synchronously work on math problems. So what happens is the teacher goes on and creates a class code. There's no logging in required. Students use class code and they get their own personal whiteboard. So then the teacher in the live lesson gets to say, okay, here's the math problem. The students get to solve it in their own personal whiteboard on the computer, and the teacher has access to all of their work synchronously. So they're able to kind of connect and synchronously see all their work at the same time. I love things that don't require logging in, which makes things so much easier. It's really quick and easy, and I know it's been awesome for math teachers, science teachers who are doing like chemical equations and things like that, because it's so easy for students to be able to just write out their work, and then the teacher can see all of the people who are logged into that account and can kind of see it all at once. Okay. So I'm just gonna, this is the tech portion, I guess, and I'm just gonna share some things that my students really love, that they use asynchronously on their own. There are things that we already use in the classroom. There's some things I've given them just because they said they needed help with it. This is for my lower elementary kids, or my kids who need more physical activity. Like I had said, my students are on the computer quite frequently in my classroom, but there's the opportunity to get up, to move around, to talk. But I feel like they're spending, obviously, because that's the only thing they really have to do, they're spending so much time on the computer in front of a screen. So Move It connects to your browser, and what it allows you to do is set a time limit. So every 20 minutes, every 30 minutes, every 15 minutes, 2 minutes, your screen will kind of disappear and an exercise will come up. So it gives them the opportunity to like take scheduled brain breaks almost, which is great, especially for my students who don't have parental support at home and might not have somebody to say, hey, you've been on the computer for like 6 hours, probably a good time to like step away for a minute. And it's nothing that you really need any equipment for. It's just kind of like you're like hop up and down on your left and right foot. Just simple things that they can kind of do to take a quick break from the work that they're doing. A lot of my students needed that in the classroom, and they were very good about figuring out when they needed that time to kind of break away. The new schedule has made it difficult for them to do that or recognize that, so the computer kind of recognizes it for them.
Quick questions here in the chat for you, Katie,
Yes.
to just back up really quick about the whiteboard. And there was a question about whether or not it was free, and then what features that the whiteboard FI has that are beyond, like, say, Jamboard, and how they might be different.
Good question. So yes, it is free. Anything I put in the presentations, just I should have prefaced that at the beginning, are free. I'm so not big on paying for anything. So if it's free, I will share it, and it is 100% free. There's no premium or anything like that. It's better than the Jamboard, because Jamboard, if you noticed when I gave you that assignment, it was one solid space. It was just like one. I mean, you can make different pages, but it's still one document. What this does is it allows the teacher kind of be in charge almost of the document. So what happens is you get a class code, students join the code, they just type in their first name. On my end as the teacher, I can see all 27 screens that each student has. Not their screen itself, but their whiteboard. So I can see their individual writing, and I can see who's doing what, and that kind of makes it a little bit different than Jamboard. It's the same kind of tools, the writing, the highlighting, the circling, but it's a singular space for the student to work without interference from anybody else, while still having the teacher being able to see everything that's happening, so they can pinpoint students who need support.
Excellent. Thank you, Katie.
No problem. This one's a little bit different. It's kind of similar to Move It, but more just reminders to take a break. I mean, even as a teacher, I feel like I'm spending all day, every day on the computer. So it's good to have reminders once in a while to get up, move around, stretch, stop staring at the screen. So this is more of I would say more of a secondary level. My students who would look at me like I was crazy if I asked them to hop up and down on one foot in my classroom would be the ones I would give this to. My ones that like to move around, things like that, I would Move It to, but just kind of offer an alternative. This is a good one for your students who might need support reading out loud. I know that I kind of talked about how the accessibility features are built into all these devices, but the voices still kind of are lousy. And my students are very picky about the voices that are used on their devices, and if they hate the voice, they won't listen to it. So this is Natural Reader, and it's also free. You can upload a document, an assignment, anything that's, you can copy and paste text, and it reads it in a more natural voice. It's still a computer, but it sounds a little bit more like a human than some of the other computerized voices. So my students do kind of like this one, and it also bonus turns the font from whatever font the PDF, the doc was into the dyslexia font, which doesn't really have any, I don't think, basis behind it, except for the fact that it makes the letters a little bit easier to distinguish, so it helps with decoding. So you can kind of do that all in one place. And I like it because it's a website, not an app, so students can get to it on any browser and things like that. But it's providing a way for them to kind of work through materials by listening to it. It tracks the text for them, and it helps kind of support them independently. This one I like. I always throw this into every presentation I do because especially now, like today, my students had a drafting day because they're writing a narrative, and they were like, okay, so can we continue to use the Noisily extension that we use in class? And I was like, yeah, of course. It's a white noise generator, so instead of listening to music while you're working, it just is a playlist of sounds that you can customize. So I'm big on, anybody who knows me knows I'm big on working in the rain. I'm very productive when it rains, especially thunderstorms. So like it has a thunderstorm feature. And you can set it for a specific duration of time, which is what I think is important. So like I told my students to have, write for 3 5-minute increments. And that's a lot for them. So they had the 5-minute timer. As soon as their noisemaker stopped, they stopped writing and took a break and things like that. But it kind of is a nice way to thinking about the UDL framework to eliminate the distractions and kind of let them focus on the task at hand. It is a website, it's an extension, and it's kind of a nice tool for students. And then this is my kind of one of my last ones. This is new, and I think it's pretty awesome. I'm a language arts teacher. in addition to special ed. So I'm doing a lot of feedback, a lot of typing feedback, a lot of comments. And I don't know if anybody else's students are different than mine. My students are very good about just hitting resolve and ignoring me. So this is actually a really nice tool that if you're looking to give authentic feedback for your students, especially your students need to hear your voice when you're giving feedback. It's called Moat. It only works within docs, sheets, and slides right now. It's still in beta mode, but you can get it as a teacher. But I like it because when I'm giving a comment, I can record myself giving the comment. And instead of having just the text show up, it has the text and a play button. So the students can not only read my comment, they can hit play and listen to me give the comment. I feel like a lot of the times, you know, things get misunderstood and misinterpreted through text. So it's nice to be able to hear your voice on top of it. I also find that if my students can hear my voice, they listen to me a little bit more than if it's just a text for me giving feedback, especially with writing. Like if I make a recommendation for something they should do, it's a nice way to kind of bring back that personalization, which a lot of students need, while still giving them the feedback for assignments. I'm not going to go into all of these, but I just wanted to kind of give an overview of some more tools that my students really love that kind of fit within the UDL framework. I don't think that we should overwhelm students, especially students with disabilities, with tools right away, especially because there are more important things like trying to get them to just let you know they're okay, trying to get in touch with them in general, just to make sure everything's going okay. But in case you're looking for things to try to support your students a little bit more, these are some tools that I found to be helpful. My students really like. I threw Jamboard in there, obviously. I tried to throw a little bit of everything on there. The representation section really focuses on how can we make sure that everything we're giving them is appropriate and supportive, and each of these are supportive tools. They're all linked for you. The engagement is more about collaboration. How can we make sure that students are collaborating within this digital space while giving them the support they need? And then action and expression is just different opportunities students have to show what they know and things that my students have used to show what they know. I've been tried to be very good about letting them pick however they want to be assessed. Show me what you're doing. We're writing a narrative right now, and I basically told them they could do it any way they wanted to. Some of them are doing it through video, some of them are doing it through just straight writing it. But trying to give options to make everything accessible for everyone. And
quick question for you, Katie, to jump to the chat. Someone asked if students would need to have the Moat extension as well in order for them to listen to your comment.
So that's why I actually like that one so much. You don't. So I used to use Kaizena a lot, but I found that the students kind of needed to have that add-on themselves. This one, they don't need to have the extension, so it pops up automatically for them. I like to test things on my kids. I'm always like, oh, kids, new thing, let's try it. Yeah. So I had some of them do it on Google Meet with me the other day to make sure on their end they could see it too, and they can, and they don't need to have it on their computer.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem. So this is just a resource for you guys to kind of click through some of my students' favorite things that they like to use and things you can use to build different lessons for them that are providing different levels of support. So these are kind of my final things going into the end. I wanted to give some time at the end in case you had any questions and things like that, or wanted feedback on anything you're doing with your students. My first consideration for supporting all students in digital spaces is to be flexible. And I think we're all being very flexible right now. I know it's difficult for everyone, so it's important to remain kind of flexible on things. For me, that means in terms of requirements, what am I requiring you to do? What is the deadline? We don't have deadlines in my district. Like you can submit things up until the very end and it doesn't really make a difference. So my students usually have to tell me that, okay, I redid this, and I go back and I look at it. Assessments, how are they being assessed? That was probably one of my favorite things about the remote learning, that I was able to throw away all the common assessments that I used to do and I used to hate doing with my kids, and I felt like I had to. I was able to throw them away and say, okay, you're gonna do whatever you wanna do to show me what you learned. And flexible about feedback. Really trying to give authentic feedback for students to kind of make the learning more accessible for them. I really found that I actually have I'm pretty fortunate. I have one class that I don't grade, which is awesome. It's never graded. And then I have another class that is graded. And I found that the meaningful feedback has been helpful in terms of students really stepping up and trying new things because they feel like almost there's no risk of failure. They just keep applying the feedback and they're not worried about a grade. Start small, cut the workload a little bit. So I found that one of the biggest obstacles for some of my kids was that they were doing the same work they were trying to do in school and they were struggling. So I really try to make it, I think about what we do in a typical day in my classroom, and then I cut it in half, and then I like cut it in half again almost to kind of give them the time that they needed. Start with what's familiar to them first, because I think the little successes at the beginning are great. At the very beginning, I was trying to give them assignments that were, I don't want to say easy, but I knew wouldn't be a super hard challenge for them to kind of make them feel successful, and then going into a little bit more difficult things. Embedding choice in how students access materials, access content, and then don't be afraid to try new things when you want to, when you feel like your kids are ready. My kids are finally, I feel like, at the point where we're trying to start a little bit new things, but I'm not trying to overwhelm them all at once. And don't be afraid. My biggest one is to plan with them. Before spring break, I literally sat in Google Meet with my kids, and I was like, these are the units we have left. We're probably gonna make it through 2. Pick your units, because I don't think we're not gonna make it through all of them. And I was able to actually plan out kind of where we would go in the unit with my kids. They talked where they thought they would struggle, where they thought they needed support, and it was good to get their feedback. So that is everything that I have. But I wanted to kind of leave time in case there was any questions that I missed or any concerns anybody had or anything. I was trying to throw, my presentations tend to throw things at people, and I hope that something like 1 or 2 things sticks with people.
This was excellent, Katie. I would like to just say that the considerations you have for UDL are so appropriate right now, even for educators that have never been particularly tech savvy and need a good place to start. So this is a really comprehensive overview on and new some of these tools that I've never heard of, particularly Moat, which I would be really interested in using myself. So I think that this is a really excellent way to engage people, not just special educators, but teachers that may lack a firm understanding of some technological resources and how they could be applied to their students. So I'd like to just say that as well. And there's one question here. Are you going to email this out? And so if you are looking for a copy of the webinar, we're going to post this on the NJCU website under our department website for our events. So if you'll take a look there, we'll make that available and the copy of the recording available. If Katie provides the slide deck, I'll post the slide deck as well for everybody as well.
And I'll go back to the first page too. I'll send the link to you, but I'll also, the URL is also here just in case too. Then you can click through that whole page of technology stuff. I tried to go through and I asked my kids this week, I was like, what tech tools are we using that you like? And so they gave me a list. So, but yeah, again, hopefully I just figured I'd share some things that I thought helped my students. I know this has been a struggle for everyone. I still have students that I'm not in touch with, so I understand that the difficulty. I haven't really heard from them. At this point, most of my work has been just trying for those kids to get them just to talk. But I know we're all kind of going through different difficulties right now, so I hope that this has been helpful for people.
Is there any other questions or comments that anybody has for Katie?
So the URL will be on the website also?
We will post the URL for her webinar up there as well. Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Well, Katie, I think this was so much for people to digest because there is an amazing amount of resources here that you did an incredible job to put together, and you did so so meaningfully. And I want to thank you for this because there's so much that even here that, you know, a lot of people that have been working with different tools may be familiar with, but there's a lot here that we can look at to learn moving forward as well. So thank you so much for providing all of these resources, and the fact that they're free is very awesome, and people can't wait to explore. So thank you so much.
No, of course, no problem. I'm just happy to share, and the free is the big thing. So And especially now, that's the only thing I want to say too. If there's something, if there's a tech tool you want to try now as a teacher, now would be the time to do it, because so many of them are trying to have given like free trials, free extended like usage through like the beginning of next year. So like that's a really great way to figure out what works with your kids, because it's free right now. And then if your district is looking for things to purchase, at least then you can say, hey, I know this works with my kids too. So that's something I've been doing too. Just things I know that are expensive, and I'm like, oh, it's free for a while. Let's see if it actually works with my kids, and then we can maybe
So
make a pitch for it.
is Whiteboard FI, is that a link to Google or Classroom or no?
No, it's just the website.
Okay, so when you put your kids in, how do the kids get in? If I'm doing a Google Meet and I wanted them to use the whiteboard, how would I get them in?
So when you create it on your end as the teacher, it gives you a code, almost like you would use to join like Google Classroom. You give the students that code, and then they're able to enter, and they get their own whiteboard.
So I can put the code on my class, like announcements, and they can click on and use it?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. And I put my Twitter handle on there, so if it doesn't work or something, just let me know, and I'll troubleshoot with you.
Okay, thanks.
And for anybody that was interested, I dropped Katie's slide deck using that tiny URL into our chat notes there. So if you are looking for being able to access that right away, I did put that in there for you too. So you can just copy and paste what was found there on that tiny URL. So if there's no other questions, I want to say thank you again, everybody, for coming to join our webinar. And thank you again to Katie for doing such an amazing job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye, everybody.
Katie.
Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
Awesome job, Katie.
Thank you, guys.
We love you. Bye, guys.
Everybody.
She's in cohort 7, guys.
Take it easy.